Hello!
Hello!
Welcome to the Cult Bar, Volume 22. How are you, Renee?
I am good despite the universe trying to keep me from making it today.
Yeah, you had a little technical difficulties, but we're here now, so it's all good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess we shall start with beverages. What do you have?
I have a classic. I'm drinking jungle juice in my bad witch energy glass. So your basic jungle juice recipe is Hawaiian punch, 7-Up vodka. I added a little pineapple juice and a squirt of lime in mine.
Okay.
Tastes better than the stuff that I threw up in college, so we're good.
I think that is a ubiquitous college drink, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, because people will literally fill a trash can with just random punches and alcohols that people have brought. It's designed to make you have bad memories associated with Hawaiian punch.
Mm-hmm. What does the glass say?
But it's good. It's good.
Okay. What does the glass say itself?
Oh, bad witch energy. Because it is
Nice.
getting to be that time of year.
It is that time of year, I think. Yeah.
Well, it's that time of year for me all year, but
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. All right. Well, mine I just found today, and I'm actually going to drink a beer. I usually do not.
Oh.
So the reason that I am doing that is because I am having this proper dose.
Oh my God.
Weekly stuff. I saw that and I was like,
oh, you're having a fruity thing too.
Yes, I'm having a New England IPA, which is 7.3% ABV. And after I pour this, I will show you my glass, which I think you'll appreciate. It is. Well, it says Apocalypse on the back. This is from my favorite brewery who recently just closed, the North Brewery. They're like you would buy a membership quote for beverages to be, and they would call it their cult. So, yeah, look at that.
Yours is perhaps more appropriate for the show than mine, but
no, because as we've talked about in previous episodes, it's in the freaking jungle, so that makes a lot of sense.
Oh, I meant your cup, but yeah. So if you've been following along at home, I did not find Jones soda to do the Jones vodka soda. And we're not doing another Jonestown episode, so I guess it's not happening.
Yeah.
You can save that one for your Halloween parties or something this year.
Yeah, I didn't look for the Jones soda, but yeah. So
they were everywhere right up until I wanted them,
Of course, that's how it works. And then when you haven't, it's like the opposite when somebody says, "Hey, have you seen all these things?" And you go, "No." And then you see them everywhere, whatever it happens to be. Have you seen a Cybertruck? No. And then you see 50 of them and you're like, fucking A, I was better when I didn't see those things.
Somebody in our neighborhood, well, in our small town, I don't know if it's our neighborhood, but I see them all the fucking time because the main road is the highway. Someone has one. There's a little dumpster truck driving down the highway, blighting the beauty of the desert.
Well, as the song goes, life is a highway. So let's move on. I apologize. So yeah, this is just a good New England style IPA, just for the record. So, oh no, poor Zach. By the way,
yeah. I saw one that had a wrap on it that had like a novel on it about this guy's business, and it had so much crap on it I couldn't even tell what the business was.
Dude, they look like pixelated cars. Well played, Zach. I last week, was it last week? Yes, last week I was in California with Jill for travel for her work, and I was working remotely, and the amount of fucking Teslas I saw every fucking place I went.
Oh yeah.
It was just absurd.
Before everyone knew what was going on with Elon, They were like extremely popular, but they're also extremely expensive, and the waiting list is long. So those people are like, all right, like, I guess I have a Tesla now.
Yeah. Yeah, Zach, I was in California. I was in LA for one day. And if I would have been there for a couple of days, I would have asked to meet up and hang out. But unfortunately, we were there for one day and then we flew up to San Francisco. So we weren't exactly local.
I didn't even get to see him, Zach.
Yeah. So apologies. So, yeah. Well, we should start before we even delve into news. Let's do trigger warnings and let's get those out of the way. So, what are the trigger warnings for this episode, Renee?
All of them.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So, well, and if we're including the news, there's going to be some child sexual assault. There's going to be religious coercion and control. There's going to be abusive relationships. There's going to be child abuse. There's going to be forced labor. There is going to be murder and suicide. Large scale, unimaginable tragedy, which is, what Jonestown is known for, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Child death. I think that's everything.
Yeah.
Like literally every trigger warning that exists, I think we hit. But yeah.
Yeah. This is it's the most infamous one for a reason. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's so hard. I mean, Doug and I do this show because we were watching these in our free time anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen a lot of cult documentaries. I've listened to any number of podcasts about cults. I listen to literal cult podcast every week. These were hard for me, like really, really difficult. The first one, because it was shitty. And the second and this one, because it is truly unimaginable tragedy. And even as it's playing out in front of you, it's like, it was breaking me down without me really understanding what happened. Because I still don't feel like I've wrapped my brain around that. And Zach, if you come to the cult bar.
Sort of implied. Sort of implied. You're welcome, Hex. So
we try to cover them, and I know we don't always manage to get all of them, but these are really sensitive subjects. Every episode we've done, even the fun ones, have had some sensitive subjects, and because these shows are also recorded, if you really feel like you're not ready to just take it as it comes, I would welcome anybody to leave a comment on my Facebook, in the Facebook group, on our YouTube. And I would be happy personally to figure out like where our timestamps are on the stuff that you might be particularly concerned about, because I don't want anybody, the point of this show is to engage in something interesting in a way that is somewhat fun. And if you're not having fun, then that really sucks. And we don't want anybody to we don't want to trigger anybody or send somebody into a dark place if we're covering stuff that's going to hit them especially hard.
Yep. So we try to be mindful of that. So, yeah. All right. That being said, maybe it's time for a smidge of news.
So basically our news is the announcement of a sequel to a documentary that we have done in the past. And we're playing with our new settings, excuse us.
Apologies.
We did Wild Wild Country as one of our very first ones. And you may have noticed that there weren't any kids in the documentary. And I thought the reason there weren't any kids in the documentary was because these were all just young adults who didn't have kids, who were happy to go join this cult where there was like a lot of free love and weirdness and sex. But the real reason that there were no kids in the documentary is because they sent all their kids to boarding school. And this started well before they ever got to the US. This started in ashrams in India. And at these boarding schools, these children were groomed to the point that it's that they didn't even realize that what was happening to them was wrong, really, until they were adults. And in this documentary, it is the children who are now adults who either saw Wild Wild Country or heard about it and kind of felt like they really didn't say anything about us. They really didn't say anything about what we went through. And now there's a documentary about them following up on some pretty horrific shit. Kids as young as 7 years old were having sex with grown adults. Kids were encouraged to just be in the room while adults were having sex. One of the things that comes up in this is that the woman who is interviewed in this particular article of the Sunday Times says that Ma'an and Sheila had them write the names of the men that they had had sex with in their diaries, and she read them and she knew that it was going on. In the documentary, it appears that she denies this. So, for legal reasons, whatever. But personally, it seems more likely than not that she would know about it. And basically, well, I'll say this. If you want to know why I think that maybe Sheila knew about it, she said, no one has said that children should engage in sex. And if it happened, it is the children's choice. And someone said, the reply was, I don't think you can say that of a 13 or 12-year-old child or even younger. And Sheila says, but I cannot take responsibility. When the woman being interviewed, Perizonius, says, I think you can, Sheila ends the interview. So, I think we're probably going to end up covering this because it seems like it's pretty important to see this side of what was going on at the Rajneeshi compound and worldwide under Osho's influence. And we didn't cover it because it wasn't in the documentary. And then in addition to that, Osho is still considered a spiritual leader. There's still an organization that basically owns the licenses to all his stuff. They make money on it. People take spiritual advice from Osho. They meditate the way he says to meditate, etc. And so I think it's really important that people understand what their source actually is. Because while there was a lot of gray in Wild Wild Country, there's absolutely no such thing as a gray area when it comes to adults sexually abusing children. So,
nope.
Yeah, it's shitty news, but it is news. And I felt it was important for us to talk about. And again, I think we'll be covering this soon on the show because these people deserve to have their voices heard. And that is why they did this film, because they could not really cope with the idea that everyone was getting this view of the Rajneeshis that kind of just pretended that there were no children at all. So how could they have been harmed?
Yeah, like this particular image is not one I remember from the documentary at all. So
no.
This had to be something else. But again, like you said, in the documentary, they very, very pointedly did not include any children in the images.
The article did say they didn't mention them once. Now, I didn't have time to go back and rewatch the whole documentary to confirm that. But to my memory, I think that's true, that they just didn't mention it. And we definitely didn't see them because they weren't living there. They were sent away so that they would not interfere with their parents' sex lives. That is the literal reason.
Yeah. So a couple things here.
We both did it at the same time.
Yeah, so cult leaders and abusers benefit from silence. So talking about this, absolutely, Zach, you are correct. So yeah, that's important. Zach also said he's kind of front loading now because he might not be. Maybe he has to change his slippers or something. I don't know.
No, I think he knows it's about to get serious, so he doesn't want to get silly. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so
we might need you to come in with something off the wall later when it gets too heavy, though.
Yeah, that's fair. In reference to the trigger warnings, I believe Hex is saying it's important to discuss, even if sensitive, and it is. And part of the reason we're doing this because it's important to talk about, because this is real life. This is what happened to people. So, it's kind of important.
And it does reflect. So these are like extreme examples, right? But this does happen in family settings. It happens in romantic relationships. It happens in smaller churches that nobody knows enough about to think anything of them. It
happens in bigger churches too.
Sorry?
Happens in bigger churches too.
Well, but I feel like people look at that on the outside at least, right? And so whatever. But it happens in all sorts of relationships. It happens in workplaces. And I think it is important to understand where the high control and high demands are and what they look like, because they tend to look the same on a wide angle view, whether it is an interpersonal relationship or a small group or a cult. And it's good to be aware of it, because as we've seen over and over again on Cult Bar, the victims of these cults are not stupid people. They're not people who can't function in life. I mean, sometimes that is the case, but a lot of people in these cults are very intelligent people who were going through something terrible in their lives, or were kind of spiritually afloat, just waiting for a place to land. And they got sucked into these things because, and it never starts with the guy asking you to kill yourself.
Nope.
So.
And yeah, we'll get into this, the documentary we watched this time. One of the quotes was, talking about, lots of people say this, you never go in thinking you're going to be in an occult. You just are, right. You don't think that. So, people going in, and we've talked on the previous episodes about how the base of what they started, where it was inclusivity and diversity and all that is great. That sounds excellent. To be able to have a diversity of voices and all that stuff. And just, unfortunately, that wasn't the full scope of it, but yeah. So.
Yeah. And I think the reason why I liked this documentary. So the reason we both kind of disliked the first documentary was we felt like it was devoid of context, right? Mm-hmm. And without context, you can kind of say a lot of things, and you don't have to support those claims, and you don't, whatever. The second one had a lot more context, but it was very focused on the end. Whereas this one, we saw a lot of the same faces, we heard a lot of the same voices, but we did get an even bigger context of how people joined in the first place, why they joined, what they were hoping to get out of it. I think that this is one situation where even some of the diehard members, excuse that turn of phrase, that was terrible. Even the hardcore members were not necessarily people who were in a bad place in their lives. They were people who really wanted to make a difference in the world. Yep. And so it's really, I don't know. I think I did share this on Cult Bar before. When I read the Jeff Gwynne book and they were talking about what the People's Temple was doing in Indiana, I thought, this is really scary, because I would want to know more. Me personally, I would want to know more if there was a church organization doing those things in my neighborhood. I would want to get involved. Mm-hmm. And that's after reading. One of the things they didn't get into in this any of the documentaries we watched is Jim Jones was fucked up from day one. They talk a little bit about it in this documentary.
Yeah, they did that a little bit. Yeah.
There was they talk about he was obsessed with power and death, and he would hold funerals for animals and may have killed some of these animals just to hold funerals for them. But he had a Nazi phase as a child, among other things.
Now, if you're saying you have a Nazi phase as a child, that's kind of fucked up.
There might be some problems in the house. Oh, what happened? Did you see that?
I saw something flash on the screen, but we're using some new formats tonight, so
okay. Sorry. Well, there's our levity, I guess.
Yes.
But yeah, so even knowing that reading that book, I really felt like, man, he was evil from the day he was born, and then got to what they were doing in Indiana and was still like, man, it sounds so good though.
Yeah, I think he was just a person who just was able to tap into. He felt like I can do this and draw people, and maybe there was part of him who really believed it. There could very so thumbs up for cults. So yeah, I just think he's like a lot of these cult leaders who are very good at reading what can I do to draw people in, and
When I think,
seeing the movement of the time with the civil rights movement and all that stuff, because he was coming in off of that to really like use that as part of the church and doing that he was doing that in Indiana, which wasn't going to fly.
yeah,
And then moving to California was better, but then he moved to like the middle of California, which is, as you and I had a discussion offline,
it's.
maybe
I thought it was Northern California, like actual Northern California in the middle of nowhere.
I'm not sure. It was what was it? Eucria? You're right.
Yeah. So let's look on the map.
Yeah,
Because it's a place I'm not like, because there's a city near me called Yucaipa, but it wasn't that.
Ukiah. Yeah. So apps.
Oh, here it is. Okay. Yeah. So that is
Ukiah
that is north of San Francisco. It's pretty far north.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But it's rural. It's not the city. So it was close enough for them to go back and forth to San Francisco, which they did a lot for recruitment. And they were very involved in politics there, which again, we understand why Jim Jones was getting away with certain things because he made himself invaluable to the local politicians. Because he could bring a crowd, he could bring protesters, he could bring people to support you at a rally, and they meant it. They were excited to be there. It wasn't like paid protesters. It was like, hey, we actually believe in this. And that was mostly happening in San Francisco, not in the town where they were trying to set up their like desegregated neighborhood, integrated neighborhood.
Yeah, I want to get your take on this because Zach made 2 points, and you live in California and have for a while.
Yeah,
he believes it's better split east and west as opposed to north south. But he also said East California is like a whole nother world.
I feel like it's like, I don't know. I feel like there's an argument to be made for that for sure. But like, it's more like little sections all the way. Because like I live in the Inland Empire, which is not the best part of California, but I live in like the best part of the Inland Empire. And we have like a completely different culture than what you would associate with the Inland Empire.
You live in a place called the Inland Empire?
I live in a place that David Lynch made a movie about, yes.
Jesus.
And not like a fun one about Joshua Tree. The Inland Empire was one of his later ones. It was about how terrible the Inland Empire is. Right. So I do agree coastal California and the Nevada side are very different. But once you get down where I'm at, it's more like the difference between the high desert and the low desert and the difference between the desert and everyone else. Yes.
This is great. I have no idea. I know K-Rock was a giant radio station in California and LA.
Just go watch the movie Inland Empire and you'll get it.
So Inland Empire was actually the name of the David Lynch film.
Yeah. And Greg is right. California is a country within itself, and like all of our little counties and sections are more like different states with different cultures. And
yeah, well,
but where he was north of San Francisco. It's really rural. This is where before California legalized weed, like that's where people went to. The documentary Murder Mountain, it takes place up there, you know. So yeah, it's not San Francisco, it's not LA, but it was close to San Francisco. And if we remember a little bit from the last documentary, he knew that there was going to be some stuff coming out about his behavior with members of the church because he was not just having inappropriate relationships with female members. He was having inappropriate relationships with the male members. He told everyone that they were gay, and then offered to screw men in the ass when they joined, whether they showed any interest in that or not. So
yeah, that was something in this documentary that I didn't know before, was the idea that he basically said everybody's homosexual except him. He was the only heterosexual, except he wasn't heterosexual. So
no.
yeah. So
we actually see that in Heaven's Gate as well.
Okay, well, we haven't touched on that one yet. That's another big one that at some point we'll get to. But
Next
I'm kind
year.
of like, yeah. I think
But
we
I would
just
say,
do. I think we
if you
do
have a
one
religious
big one every
leader-
year.
Yeah, if you have a religious leader who's telling you how gay you are, there's a pretty good chance that there's some gayness happening in them. In a truly progressive world, the one that Jim Jones was pretending to want, he probably just would have been like a bisexual guy who did protests on the weekends or something.
Yeah. This is Florida's its own country too, but in a completely different way.
I don't know if it's a completely different way, but there's sections of California that could just plop right in the middle of Florida and be perfectly happy.
Well, I was in one, as I mentioned to you, when Joe and I were driving through the part of California, and sort of like the middle, but we were going toward the Sierra Nevadas up north, and it is all almond tree farms and avocado tree farms, and just
my old neighborhood.
Miles of those farms. And Joel and I were in a diner, and one guy was wearing a Trump hat, and another older white couple behind Joel were like, "Love your hat." And then they just started going off on how great Trump was and how we have to have another person just like him when he dies. And I was like, and Joel and I kind of looked at each other like, are we safe? Like it was a momentary, like, holy shit. But that's where we are. So yeah.
It does crack me up, like the general hatred of California, that we're all like super woke mob liberals. And it's like, have you been to Orange County, the entire middle of the state, San Diego, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Yeah, it's
New York State is exact, but New York State is the exact same thing. We have one giant city and several other cities, and that's what makes the state blue. Everything in the middle, except for like Ithaca, is red. Like it's just red all through the middle of the state, and it's just rural, so there's not as many people. So that's the thing people don't understand. Like New York State is not just a super liberal bastion of society. It is not. It is I mean, if you only have to look at our fucking, like, the mayor of New York City and see all that nonsense, and then our governor's kind of a wingnut, and they're Democrat, but they're very much not liberal. It's funny when I hear people say New York is such a liberal state. We generally vote Democrat, but like, sorry, we're going on a whole tangent about politics.
It was a bad idea, is the point. It was a bad idea for a lot of reasons. But then he knew he was about to be outed for his sexual impropriety, is what a lot of people believe. And probably this is the other thing, is that this documentary got more into the fake faith healing, which the previous two didn't really get into. This one actually had one of the former members saying, like, she witnessed a healing. She held this woman and cried with her, and then later found out it was one of Jim Jones's secretaries, just like in old people drag.
Mm-hmm. It wasn't even an old person. They just dressed up a person to look old. And they had video of her, that was the insane part.
Well, because she walks real like, oh, I can't do it. And then she walks a little bit better, and then she's running around dancing, and like, yeah, if you believed it, that would be very powerful. And by then he'd already had such a hold over people belief wise. And one of the things they talk about in The Road to Jonestown, the Jeff Gwynne book, is like he was doing, if you saw the Andy Kaufman movie when he was like doing the alternate healing for cancer, and they were like pulling the cancer out and it's like raw chicken. Jim Jones was doing that too up there in Northern California. And obviously members of the church were helping him do it. They were helping him get away with it, but it was a small number of people. The majority of the people were not. And then you have this other element where there were people who were like, I know that's bullshit, but I was never really here for the Jesus part of it anyway. I was here for the social movement, and that's still happening. So I'm just going to stay quiet and be glad that we're bringing in money, basically.
Yeah, it's kind of like the greater good thought process. Like, well, that's not what I'm here for, and I think that's kind of bullshit. But they're affecting real change by going in and being political and going in and doing these different things. And the guts of it, where they were like, you want to be with us, we'll provide food, we'll provide housing, we'll provide health care. Like, all that sounds very utopian, and selling that dream was what he was good at. And he actually did provide some of it, to be clear, but like, he was also just not a good person. So it's a tough thing, because I could see how this is one of those cults where I look at it, and a lot of them I'm just like, I don't fucking get it. I generally don't get it. This one I totally get. Like, I could see someone saying, I'm starting a movement. We're going to be very progressive. We're going to help poor people. We're going to feed poor people. We're going to clothe them. We're going to provide shelter. We're going to do all these things. And I would be all in on that.
Well, and the other thing is that, so there was someone in there saying, like, it functioned as a Black church. The majority of the membership was Black. The like style of worship fit more with that idea than like you would see in a mostly white church. His preaching style, you actually hear some of it in this one prior to when they get down to Jonestown. It all really feels like a Black church, but the significant difference is at that point in time, a lot of Black churches focused on the afterlife. You're suffering now. It sucks now, but in the afterlife, it's going to be great. And what he was offering them was, we can make it great now. And we had that story, which sounds really like wild. Like, I don't know how to explain it, because if I didn't know what I know about Jim Jones, I would think it was badass, right? Where he tells the Black memberships of the church that the Bible has been used to hurt them and hold them down. And then he lights it on fire and is like, see, I didn't get struck down by God.
Was he lighted on fire? I thought in this documentary he threw it or some shit.
Oh, he threw it.
Sorry, I wasn't trying to correct you. I just, for some reason, I was remembering it differently.
I just watched
lighting it on fire would be a statement. Though.
That would have been better. Yeah.
I might have followed him if he did that right now.
But yeah, so like he had like a very radical approach. And, I think that there probably was some part of him that believed in, equality and some of the social justice stuff. But the important thing is it's like, yeah, everyone is equal except for me. I'm better. Mm-hmm. Like there was some real, not to be an armchair psychologist, but some real narcissism. I feel comfortable saying that,
I think we're good on that.
Yeah. And we got some insight into a lot of what was going on in his head. Like people saying, there's almost this implication that he wasn't exactly afraid people would leave and that would fuck Jonestown over. It was more tunnel vision than that. It was just like, how dare they leave me?
Yeah. The tone of it was very much like he took that personally, like very Michael Jordan tone. I took that shit personally, like that kind of thing. But he just saw that as, it reminds me of Trumpism in a way. Mm-hmm. It's if you leave me, you're betraying me. How dare you betray me? It feels there's parallels in that too. But yeah, he was very much like, yeah, guitar psychologist part. Fair point.
And the California show, we're mixing it up. We are a cocktail.
Yeah, we are. Yeah. So yeah, it was. There was different elements to this documentary for things that I didn't know that were part of it, like the idea that you said that he said everybody was homosexual, and he was not. He was the heterosexual, which we know from things he did that that wasn't the case. There's a few other things, and my this is the only show I did because I got so late started. I took no notes, and I'm really regretting that now
I took
because
really tiny, like a very small amount of notes too.
no, I usually, you know me, I usually write a fucking book with like I write like 5 pages of notes for every freaking show. And this show I did none because I was like, I am pressed for time. I need to watch this bit.
Oh, that he was a monkey salesman. And that fact, like, okay, this section, it was like 3 sentences fucking long, and it was the wildest shit ever. It's like, oh, my mom had a pet monkey, and you're like, that's crazy. Like, and it hung itself, and you're like, fucking what?
Like what? I know. It's like
she called Jim Jones because he sold monkeys. Anyway,
he had an ad in the paper that he was selling monkeys. Like, holy shit, they had an ad in the paper. Like, where did he get fucking monkeys? Like, what's going on?
I remember, like, it's so funny because I had forgotten this, which how do you forget this? But I remember years ago watching like one of these shows that does like a half an hour on a cult or something. And they said he was a door-to-door monkey salesman. I just, it blew my fucking mind.
A door-to-door monkey. Wow.
Yeah. And I think that that's how it is classified in the Jeff Gwynne book as well. I didn't have time to fact check it. So I think it wasn't like he happened to have some monkeys that he was selling. I think he routinely sold monkeys. And
I will just say,
but also, do they mean like it hung itself in some kind of freak accident, or like was it like a suicidal monkey? Yeah, I need so many more details. You can't just like, anyway, the monkey hung itself. Like, fuck.
Maybe it was an autoerotic asphyxiation.
Oh my God. I hope you mean monkey salesman.
Yes, I really hope that's what you're going with. Yeah, that was one of the wilder, like you said, it was fucking 3 fucking sentences. Like, hey, whoa, go back. That
you start with a
I want to know more about that.
Jump to monkey salesman, and now we're
then jump right out, and I'm like, like that's one of the things. Like, if someone said that to you in casual conversation, you would stop and have to sit to think about that for like 10 minutes.
You'd be like, I absolutely want to hear the rest of your story, but please explain every single fucking thing you just said.
For sure. Yeah, there was there was a couple other things I was just like, oh, I didn't know that. And like, not in a, like, just, all right. So we knew, I'm jumping ahead a bit here, but when we get to the part where that Jonestown, but we've covered Jonestown's 2 other episodes. Jumping around, I think this episode kind of warrants it. Yeah. But it was a part where they were talking about where with the speakers, where he was on 24/7. He would record himself. All right. My question is, when, like, what the fuck, was he just on cocaine the whole time? Because how did he find time to record all this shit and then be like, hey, I'm gone. Here's 24 hours of me. And just
here's something that none of these documentaries covered, which I think is really interesting. And maybe like this PBS one might have been made before they even knew about this. And, you know,
it was made in 2006. So it was almost 20 years ago.
He spent time with Father Major Cellist Divine, MJ Divine, who was a cult leader. And that was one of his things. He housed people in like apartment buildings and stuff. And they had the 24/7 MJ Divine over and over and over and over. And actually Jim Jones tried to take that church over when MJ Divine died. He failed. He was trying to like merge MJ Divine's church with the People's Temple. And so that to me speaks to like my suspicion, and I think a lot of people's suspicion, that he always intended to have complete control. because he was using tactics that he knew were like meant for mind control. And then the other thing is we get tastes of this in these documentaries. He recorded everything.
All of them.
So I know, but every sermon he gave.
I'm looking at you, Diddy.
Oh God, I know.
Let's not get into that.
Okay, but every sermon he gave, everything was recorded, so he had a lot of material. And again, like, unfortunately, we know this because in this documentary, so in the last documentary, this is really interesting to me. They played some of the same audio clips, but in the last one, they cleaned it up a little bit. And in this one, they didn't. So in this one, where he is scolding the mothers and telling them to just shut up and die, basically, you can hear everyone screaming. Mm-hmm. And in the last documentary, we did not hear much of that. It was horrifying. They played a lot more audio. And I've heard that the audio is rough. But I don't think anything could have prepared me. And then just that taste of it was way more than enough. You hear him talking. He's not being kind. He's not being whatever. And people are screaming bloody murder. They're screaming in pain. They're screaming in fear. They're screaming because
their children are dying.
Right. And this one also covered the fact that he would do loyalty tests all the time. And one of those loyalty tests was they would drink something. He'd be like, that's poison. And then he'd be like, haha, just kidding. So these people didn't necessarily know until the kids started dying.
Well, the other part of it is like, what I find interesting in this is like in this documentary, they specifically talked about injecting babies, which they did kind of in the mouth, which did they inject them or did you just squirt the stuff?
I think it was a syringe.
Yeah.
From that guy's telling of it, but yeah.
But just the idea of being like some of the people, there was one guy who is a black gentleman who was talking about seeing his grandmother, like basically his whole family. And he's just like, I don't have anything left.
Yeah.
And just hearing that, and it's like, and he was basically like, well, just let me lay down with them. And then he didn't. So I don't know how they didn't explain how he left. They had the one guy who we talked about in the previous one who saw his wife and his child die.
Tim,
but there's a difference between the two documentaries, though, the last one and this one. He, in this documentary, said he was in the pavilion and saw his son die, and then held his wife while she died.
Oh no, I thought that he said he had left the pavilion. I don't know.
Yeah, but in the previous documentary, he said he found them in there where they were living. But in this one, it seemed like he was in the pavilion, according to how it was phrased. Maybe I'm wrong, but
I think because he said that they were laying. Oh, you're right. I think it might have just been because he talks about laying in bed with her and being ready to say, we need to get out of here. And then they get called to the pavilion. And then we kind of get the same story from the last documentary.
Yeah. So
I don't know.
It could
but
be.
They don't talk about him being given the suitcase full of cash in this one either. So.
No, which is like a weird. The only thing they mentioned in this is he was taking suitcases of cashes in the other one. And this one, they mentioned about how the option was either you die or you go to Russia.
And Jim Jones faked that he was calling Russia to.
Yeah. So what his whole point was with Russia, that is, I don't know that one. Yeah. Oh, there was one other thing in the documentary, this one, that I didn't know. I thought Stefan was the only son he had but he had 3 sons. I'm sure he had more because he was fucking everybody in the compound. But
well, yeah, but legal sons. And we actually heard from Jim Jones Jr. in this documentary, which I thought was interesting because of his other surviving kids, which I think it was only the 3 of them, right? It was the 3 sons. Mm-hmm. Stefan is the only one that you really hear from anymore. So,
yeah. But Jim Jones Jr., honestly, it was a little bit of blind blindness on my part was just the idea that like, well, he's very clearly black, and I'm like, yeah, but he had a lot of.
Oh, no. He was adopted. He talked about that in his
That's right,
adoption
that's right.
story.
That's
And the
right.
thing
That's
is
right.
that that started well before I think before they got to California, because they were doing, this is so like fucking white people trying to be progressive. Like they invented this. They called it the rainbow family. I've seen white adoptive parents say this also today. It's like, you might want to look up who used that word before you. They call it a rainbow family because they were adopting Black kids, Asian kids.
And then they had
their own kid.
The term was natural kid. That was the one that they said in the documentary was like a natural kid. Like, oh, okay.
Well, that was Jim Jones Jr. saying that. And so that tells you maybe something about what his childhood was like.
Yeah. Anyway, that was one of the things that kind of struck me was I was trying to remember there was 2 or 3 of them, and that was one of them. So sorry, we're hopping all over the place on this one, but this is one of these documentaries where we've talked about 2 others. This is more like, I feel like we're kind of putting a bow on a lot of this with this episode to kind of this volume to talk about Jonestown and all of it. So yeah, oh yeah, that's missionaries. We should do. Could we do a show on missionaries sometime? I'm not sure we want to
concept, or because there's a lot of angles on that one, depending on
depending on the faith. I'm just saying, like, I know missionaries in several different faiths, and that feels very culty with the way how it works. Putting a bow on a turd is very
exactly
good.
Well, I would say too, like in some situations where you really see the undeniable cult-like behavior is with the missionaries and the amount of control that's over them, but that's a different episode. But yeah, there's some weird, like, I feel like we did ourselves a disservice by starting with one that was just objectively bad, right? Because they couldn't make the point they wanted to make if they had talked about the fact that Jim was also having sex with men. They couldn't have made the point they wanted to make if they had been clear that he had been having people practicing drinking poison since California. There's just a lot of things that you have to leave out to make a story where these 4 women rose to the top and decided to kill everyone for reasons we'll never understand. Where we have somebody in Jim Jones who very clearly sought spiritual control over people as a child, grew up and sought that control as an adult, and he was very good at it. And, again, none of these documentaries talk about this like weird fact-finding mission to MJ Devine's church. It's really interesting if you ever get to read the Jeff Gwynne book. But again, that means something. You don't just decide to go hang out at a cult for a while and take notes and take that back to your church that's totally not a cult. Like that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, this was the first one where the first documentary, and I'm not as well versed on Jonestown as you. You've read a lot more, watched a lot more than I have. And the idea that like this is the first time where they really broached him, like basically taking advantage of male members. This is the first time I've heard of that. And I was like, that kind of makes sense. That really makes sense in the way that he was controlling the groups and the people that followed him. Was like, he's not just going to control the women, he's going to control all of them. So,
and there's definitely an argument to be made too that perhaps the reason that he chose the social justice angle is because he felt superior to the Black members and thought that he would be able to control them more, and because they had a greater need. And so if he could fill the need, he had the opportunity to have more influence. Mm-hmm. If I'm giving you a roof over your head, food in your stomach, medical care for your children, and now I just moved you to a new country, what are you going to do? now say that moving back to your old country, you'd be in just as bad conditions as here. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
So I think that, so when I say I think that there's probably a part of him that did believe some of these things, I also think he was extremely racist. I don't think there's any fucking way around that.
No, I don't think so. I think there was very clear. I mean, not this documentary, but the previous one really kind of dug into that a bit more about the class system that was within the church.
Mm-hmm.
The concept that he brought was, hey, everybody's equal, but there really wasn't equality. It was.
I mean, it was very Animal Farm, right? It's like everybody's equal, but some
Mhm.
are more equal than others.
Yeah, but that's the thing is he was able to put up a front that this everybody's equal, everybody's on equal footing, all that shit, and that's not the case. But it reminds me a bit of this sort of, I'm going to use modern day things of just like the pseudo liberal will like, well, I don't see color, like those kind of folks. Like, well, I'm not racist because I don't see color. I want everybody equal. But like at the same time, they're the same kind of people who are like, well, I don't want to go downtown because that's scary to me. Like,
Yeah. But every time they say a part of town is a bad part of town, it just happens to be a part of town where people who aren't white live. Yeah.
yep,
I think,
exactly.
and not just that, but like, when you say I don't see color, then that gives you freedom to dismiss
The struggles
experiences.
of the struggles of people who are of color.
Yeah.
So
And so that's also a different episode. Maybe that's our next episode, actually, because we are going to talk about that. We'll get there later, though.
yeah.
I think I don't know. I think there's two things that this documentary did. I don't even want to say better, but just like bigger than the last one is we got a really clear view of why people followed him in the first place and what they thought they were doing in Jonestown. Because even the people who weren't necessarily happy there, a lot of them did want to stay because they really thought eventually they'd have the thing they were building, right?
Yeah.
And I really empathized with, we heard this in the first one where it was like everything changed when Jim Jones got there. But what we heard in this one is like, he traveled. So it was like everyone would be happy and they're dancing and singing while they're working and having a great time. And then Jim Jones would come back and he would be there and it was just a totally different experience. And I think it's easy. We see this in interpersonal relationships. We see this in jobs. We see this in marriages. It's easy to only focus on the times when you're singing and dancing and not the times where you feel oppressed by someone's presence.
Well, I agree. I think sometimes as human beings, sometimes we're more inclined to remember the good times. It reminds me of something. If you're in a shitty marriage, if you're at a shitty marriage and you're just like, oh yeah, but we built all this. It's been great. We've had 20 years together and the first 10 years were just magical. And then it just, for the last 10 years has been bad. But yeah, but we had those 10 years.
Right.
I feel like it's that sort of same mentality. Like
it's that cycle of abuse.
I've invested myself in this.
Yeah. So like they think because they have to probably that they will finish building this utopia and it will be beautiful, it will be amazing. And then Jim Jones comes and everyone's in a bad mood. But then he leaves and everybody's happy again. So like every time you feel kind of bad, that goes away.
Yeah.
So when you feel bad, you're like, but we're doing this thing that's really important. And when you feel good, you're like, hey, everybody's happy because we're doing this thing that's really important. And I get it. I think it's easy to understand when you kind of change the perspective a little bit and view it through a lens of something more familiar, like that person who's been miserable in their marriage for as long as you've known them, but swears that it's all going to be okay one day, right? Or it's okay this week, so it's okay,
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and then the second thing was I think the last documentary focused on what happened on the airstrip, the massacre at Jonestown, and then the experiences of the people who had to go clean up, which I think was great. And I'm glad we had all of those perspectives, but this one really focused on the perspective of the suicides and murders, mostly murders.
Yeah, that one
Of
guy
course,
said,
suicide is murder. Like whatever.
that one guy did say that was not suicide; those are murders. Like, remember the one guy said that in this documentary, so he was
Yeah,
just
and
very
then
clear.
Tim Carter said they were slaughtered. He did not say they killed themselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, really focusing on that, and actually, as much as I hated hearing the full audio that had all the screaming, all of the terror, it definitely, I mean, you don't want to walk away from that experience making jokes about Jonestown.
Yeah. And that was something, that was a point that you had made about the kind of sort of flippant sort of attitude we have towards humor of that. And yeah, that's rough. Like, people are still suffering from that. And that was, decades ago. And it's still people who still live, who are in that or part of it, or have family members who died in it. They're still struggling through that. Grief is not a finite timeline. Grief goes in a lot of different directions for many people. So I agree that that's like, I'm guilty of doing the Kool-Aid jokes just like anybody else, but that's, like I said, it's been kind of ubiquitous for our culture now. It's like, just that don't drink the Kool-Aid kind of deal. So yeah,
I don't think it helps also, for the record, that Heaven's Gate had a lot of Kool-Aid stuff too. And so I think that probably played a role, like in that particular thing. But I think it's a security blanket, right? Because if I can say, well, those people were crazy, because only a crazy person would kill themselves because this guy said so. It does two things. One, really bad things don't happen to people. They do them to themselves, and I would never do that. And two, I am too smart to ever fall for it. So I'm safe, and I can hold this unimaginable tragedy at arm's length and never really deal with it on an emotional level, because I'm safe. Nothing's going to happen to me. It's like, okay, well, more than likely that is not going to happen to you. But it did happen, and it's horrible.
And nearly 1,000 people died as a result. Nearly 1,000. Like, that's not an insignificant number. That is a very large number.
Yeah, it's just crazy to think about.
Yeah, I have a question for you that I just thought of. Not that it's a thing like I'm a genius. That's not it. It's more like, why did Jones not drink the potion and have someone shoot him? Because very clearly he had someone shoot him instead of actually ingesting what everybody else was ingesting.
I think he didn't want to suffer. Death by cyanide poisoning is fucking horrible. He only convinced those people to do it. One, because they didn't fucking think that there was really cyanide in it. And two, because he kept telling them that when it eventually was real, it was going to be a painless death. We have to take a look around you while it's happening all around you. You know that it's not a painless death. And I think he knew it wasn't a painless death. But if you take a shot to the head, you're done. You don't experience that pain.
So instead of just, part of me wonders if, I'm not going to phrase this right, like, there's a cowardice to doing it that way.
Oh yeah, I think so. I do. I don't think that his suicide was.
I don't think that was a suicide.
Yeah,
I think he commanded someone to shoot him. He didn't commit suicide, I don't think.
I mean, I think that's, to me, that's like saying, oh, suicide by cop isn't suicide. But if you go out waving a gun at cops, you know what's going to happen. And I think the reason I don't like calling it suicide is because people who commit suicide are suffering from a very serious mental illness. They didn't just wake up one day and kill themselves. They were like fighting cancer, and cancer won. That's like the allegory in most people's lives. And that is not what was happening with Jim Jones.
No, agreed.
I don't think that's what it is. I think he didn't want to have to take accountability.
Yeah, I agree. I think he just didn't want to be the one, like in a way he was like, it was like one of these things where you just go, All right. Well, you kind of took the easy way out when everybody else took the hard way out. But he also didn't want to be accountable because he knew he was responsible for a congressperson's death.
Mm-hmm.
He had ordered that. And he didn't know how many other people died or survived. And there were multiple people shot in Guyana in the fucking 70s when healthcare is Guyana probably not great.
I mean, as
Unless
we
you're
know
right.
from the last documentary, those people were in a liquor store.
Yeah, they were just trying to survive. So I think he knew he was kind of screwed on that angle. So yeah.
I also think he lost of his own doing, of course, but he lost everything because I don't think that he cared as much about. It doesn't seem like money mattered to Jim Jones. Power mattered to Jim Jones, and having that following mattered to Jim Jones. So in exerting that final power over all of these people, what does he have left?
Nothing. He just wanted to exert his influence over people.
Yeah, and I think there's. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, in this case, he had exerted it in the most drastic way. So
I think there was probably, and this is like me fully speculating, taking a wild guess, but I feel strongly about this. Because, and you can hear it in the tapes from the day that he's saying some of this stuff. So I think he knew that if he went out with everyone at Jonestown, that he would never be forgotten.
Mm.
And I think that was part of it. I think it really was like a very depraved shot at what the only immortality that's truly possible.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. The idea of like wanting to be remembered in some fashion, even if it's bad.
Well, I don't think he thought it was bad. I think so. This is the thing too, is what I don't think any of these documentaries talk about, right? Like not just the 3 Jonestown ones, but like any of these cult documentaries that end in, horror. I think that these leaders convinced themselves that it's good. I think that he knew that he wasn't asking them to do this, and he wasn't holding them at gunpoint and forcing them to do this or injecting them, etc., for a revolutionary suicide. I think he knew that, but I think he spent a lot of time telling himself that is what he was doing.
That is, yeah, probably the case. Like, I don't know. I just feel like, I don't know. My brain's kind of short circuiting on this because there's just so much to it. You know what I mean? There's like just this sort of narcissistic, I'm me, and then just the idea of like, well, I'm going to be infamous. Whether people be talking about, we're still talking about Jim Jones,
right?
So in that sense, he's won. Like he's famous, but I think he's not famous in the way he would like. He would he would like to think that he was this revolutionary religious leader and wants to be framed in the sort of same context as Christ or something like that. But like,
I think he probably thought that in the longer term that he would be seen as a martyr.
It reminds me. All right, this is a bit of not a stretch, but it reminds me a bit of in the movie Seven, where Kevin Spacey's character is being driven to the site and he's like, people will puzzle over this and think about this for years. Like, I think that's probably how he thought he was going to be remembered. Like, just the idea of like, and Brad Pitt's like, no, at most you're a freak. Like, just like the idea of that, but like, he was like, now, granted, that's a movie, that's fiction. This is real life, but like,
I think that's a good point because we can only if we understood what the fuck was happening in Jim Jones' brain, we'd be in trouble, right? Like it would not be a good thing. So at best, we can kind of like guess, and I think like your idea makes sense to me. I think my idea makes sense to me. I think that it's fully possible that there's like a third idea out there that's the actual truth.
Probably 20 ideas.
I guess, like, yeah, it's, and I don't like puzzling over it because as we've seen doing this show now for over a year, over one or two, holy shit.
We're in volume 22. 22. We're in volume 22. And we skipped a month. I think we skipped 2 months.
So like next month will be
2 years.
2 years. Cool. Anyway, sorry.
By the way, next month will also be 3 years since I had a heart attack. So
Really? I thought that was after we started doing this. How
no, it was well before.
Time is a flat circle.
I swear to you that COVID fucked up all the time continuum for all of us.
Yeah, I really believe. Okay, here's my cult. Okay.
All right, I'm all in. Let's go. What is it?
I believe with all my heart and soul that time is fake. That it's not just relative, but it's completely fake, and it is something that the human brain had to create in order to function. That if we actually experienced time the way it actually happens, our brains would just fry.
Well, because time doesn't work the same everywhere.
Or for every person, or the same at age 8 as it does at age 80. Yeah, I think it's fake. I think it's made up.
Well,
but it's one of those things that was made up so long ago and has been so accepted and is probably necessary. So we just kind of like, okay, it's been 3 years, sure.
3 years in Doug time.
Well, so my belief is that you are sitting here doing a live stream with me right now. Mm-hmm. You are having a heart attack right now. You are 17 and on a date right now. Like,
so you're doing everything everywhere all at once.
Kind of, yeah. Except for timelines too. I think, I don't know. Anyway, we don't have time on this episode to get into that. And I haven't amassed a following and no one's made a documentary. So
The Church of Non-Time by Renee.
I mean, so you can join very easily by finding somebody who sells mushrooms or certain strains of weed. Exactly, Zach. I mean, I don't know how.
That's like the person goes, well, if this doesn't work, exactly. Like, just like that proves my point, even though it doesn't.
It does not. I know what I'm saying doesn't make any sense. I understand that. I'm not like delusional about this. I know that it doesn't make sense, but I do believe it.
It's one of those. Hey, all of us have some sort of, for lack of a better term, a conspiracy theory we believe with our whole chest.
Well, I don't think it's a conspiracy. I think it's necessary.
Yeah, I don't disagree. So
yeah. Anyway, I do believe in a couple conspiracy theories though. We're just not doing that tonight.
Oh, well, look at this.
That's fucking right, Zach. That's my cult is me and Zach, my one follower. Oh, and the bubble.
Somehow you got a bubble. How do you get to do that?
I don't know. It does it when I'm not doing a thumbs up.
Look who joined us.
It's Jeffrey. Hi, Jeffrey.
Welcome, Jeffrey. Glad to see you.
Oh, that's something else that's happening next month is that Jeffrey and I will be joining Doug and Greg on Brothers and Booze for our annual Thanksgiving episode.
Yeah, that'll be awesome, as it always is. And there will probably be fingernail talk because you and Jeffrey have awesome fingernails. I'm actually considering doing something where I just paint my fingernails just for. Yeah.
Just do it.
Yeah, just for fun.
They can't arrest you.
No, they can't.
Yet. Sorry to bring it down. Also, if I might self-promote for a second.
Absolutely.
If you are in California, it's probably more likely Southern California, and you have been thinking about taking a trip to Joshua Tree, the Highway 62 art tours are happening the first 3 weekends in October, starting this weekend coming. and I will be opening my studio and showing my photos and artwork. And if you come by, I've got really cool stickers of my dog and pictures that I think are beautiful, and I'll have beer for friends. So if you're going to be in the area, come on down. And then you can see like there's these signs that say Highway 62 Art Tours. You can go and you can get your little program that tells you where everything is. What is happening?
What is going on? I feel like our producer is adding shit to the mix that we just didn't know.
There's like clouds of thumbs and fire. Anyway, okay.
Oh, you're
Zach, seriously.
yes.
You especially, you just message me on Facebook and we'll sort it out. But yeah, I would love to see anybody who's interested in art or hanging out, because I signed up for all 3 weekends, which means from 10 to 4, the first 3 weekends of October, I am sat in my studio waiting to see if someone's going to come by. And it's probably going to be boring because I'm not a famous artist. I don't know if you guys knew that about me. I'm not. So please come, Zach. It would be super awesome.
That would be awesome. And if you do, there better be some photos of that shit because, yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I will not be able, between now and when the art tour start, to drive halfway to my mom's to get a piss pie. So.
A piss pie?
As Zach termed my favorite Thanksgiving tradition, which is I stop at Murray Family Farms on the way to my mom's house and buy pies and go pee. Because it's piss.
Okay. I thought there was like it was some sort of colloquialism is what I thought that was. I was like, oh shit, that's
a throwback to Brothers and Booze. That's a throwback to our annual Thanksgiving episode.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's some colloquialisms like where I'm from and well, you probably have heard it if you were in the military, was the idea of something called shit on a shingle,
Mm-hmm.
which is cream chip beef on toast.
I don't okay. I fucking love white gravy. Mm-hmm. Country gravy is the fucking shit. I do not understand why chipped beef has to come into the conversation when there is sausage and bacon and even ham. If you want to be weird, if you have to be weird, put ham in it. Piss pies and free love. I'm going to make a t-shirt that says that. No, I'm not. But
or do you want this? Golden pies. That has a whole different connotation.
I don't know what that means, Jeffrey. I'm afraid to say I want one.
oh, this is great. The only thing white I don't.
This is what happens to this show when we do 3 really fucking serious ones in a row. And guess what? Next month is gonna be fucking serious too.
Yeah, next
going
month is
to lose it.
Yeah, next month is going to be a bit worrisome from the perspective.
Next month is going to be a hard one to do 1 week before the election.
The election, yeah. So, all right. Well, why don't we talk about it? So,
why don't we talk about it? Let's do it.
Bad faith. We are going to talk about Christian nationalism and the war on democracy. So
here's the thing, and I've shared this with Doug before, but not, I don't think on the show, like many, many moons ago, like over 20 years ago, I did a fair amount of research on the Christian nationalist movement. Yeah. So I have like some baseline knowledge, but unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to view it, I have not followed Christian nationalism specifically very closely. So I haven't rotted my fucking brain with this information for 20 something years, but I do have a baseline and I'm kind of interested to see this, but I don't think I'm going to enjoy what I see. Oh, hey, it won a Palm Springs Film Festival award.
Oh, nice.
That's like 45 minutes for me.
And Ken Burns actually liked it, and Ken Burns is that's some high praise because
yeah, I think it's gonna be quality. Like I say, I don't think that it's going to be enjoyable.
Yeah, I'm gonna feel like I'm just gonna be angry most of the time.
Yes, and this is the thing, and Jeffrey makes a great point, and so I want to say it. People get really wrapped around the axle about terrorism, but the vast majority of terrorism that happens in the United States is these motherfuckers. It's people like Timothy McVeigh. It's Waco. It's this. So like I say, it's going to be a heavy one to do a week before the election, but I hope that you all join us and like pump yourselves up to go fucking make sure this shit doesn't get to take the hold it wants. But it'll be an interesting discussion. But I do think that we're going to be absolutely batshit crazy by the end of this year because of how we've decided to schedule ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. Well, since this is the third episode, we've talked about this. So let's wrap up Jonestown as much as you can wrap it up. No, that's okay. And then we'll do our thing and kind of wrap up. And, we don't need to spend another hour talking about this. We've litigated Jonestown quite a bit. And like I said, it's the biggest cult we've had. So it's one of the things where like you could talk about it endlessly, but let's do a little bit of wrap. Give us your kind of overview of Jonestown. Like I said, you've read books, you've done a lot more.
I've done a lot. And I think, well, here's the number one thing, and it wasn't wholly present in any of the documentaries, but a little bit in this one, and like I said, the book and some other things I've read. People should have known Jim Jones was a problem before he was even a teenager. Genuinely. And he had absent parents. And I think you see that a lot. You see that, Charles Manson, like it just happens. And I don't know what we need to do as a society to help kids with absent parents, because the ones that don't become cult leaders still have a really fucking hard time, right? But the struggle I have with people like Jim Jones, the struggle I have with people like Charles Manson is there's this point in time where it's like, well, maybe they wouldn't have become a cult leader if someone intervened here or there, but they were never going to be good people. They were going to be murderers, rapists. They were going to be abusive husbands. They were going to be maybe cult leaders.
Or cops.
Sorry?
Or cops. Sorry.
It's not true. Anyway, and I struggle with that because I believe people can change. I believe that it takes a lot of work and people have to want to. And I don't think that Jim Jones ever thought there was a single fucking thing wrong with him, which the irony there is that you can't be as narcissistic as he was without a great deal of insecurity. So I don't know. That's up to smarter people than me to figure out. But I just think that Jonestown in general should have been a wake-up call, not the one it became, which is that every new religious movement needs to be like scrutinized, although probably they do. But there's so many places in a child's life where if they had proper intervention, these things wouldn't have festered. And we just really fucking need to take better care of our kids. Like, I know that sounds like a crazy thing to end Jonestown on, but I really believe it. If you read Road to Jonestown, if you read about Charles Manson's childhood, you read about a lot of serial killers' childhoods. Ted Bundy, I used to be an armchair expert on him. If these men had been taken care of as children, they'd have very different stories. And some would have had some level of notoriety and fame, but not for this shit, right? Yeah. Not for horror. And I don't know. Like, what do we do? What do you do about the kid that's homeschooled by an abusive parent? Or what do you do about kids getting into more and more trouble because of the negative coping mechanisms that they are using to deal with their shitty lives? I don't know, but we need to figure it out, because Jim Jones was practicing evil, and I don't use that word lightly, as a preteen.
Yeah. I mean, how do you address someone some kid who is very clearly having some sort of issues? And a lot of times as a parent, you don't want to believe your kid is capable of evil shit. You don't want to
I don't
believe
think that
that.
we can count on the parents to do it because kids who
No, I
have
agree.
parents are not usually the issue.
Yeah,
um,
like that's the thing is like as a parent, you want to protect your kids and you want to think they can't do bad shit. Some people are just wired wrong. Some people are nurtured wrong. Some people are a combination of both. There's also the idea of choice.
yeah.
Like there is a lot of different factors into that shit. Like if you're killing pets when you were a child, that's that's a pretty big stop sign.
Yeah.
And parents
Well,
need to
I
do
think it's a
that.
combination of things, right, Doug? Like you have to be a safe adult for the children in your life that if there is fucked up shit going on, that could fuck their lives up, that they could tell you. But also you need to be an adult who's willing to be like, something's wrong and I've got to figure out what to do about it. And sometimes there's nothing you can do because that's the world we live in right now. And I think that maybe that needs to change. I think we need to care more about other people's kids.
Yeah.
Because you can care about your kid and be a great parent to your kid, but that only affects your kid.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we have grown out of the idea of it takes a village into being super
Yeah,
individualistic.
but look at Jim Jones. We're talking about the 40s.
1933 or something like that. He was born. He was born in the
Yeah.
30s.
So the village would have been observing him in the 1940s. When did we believe that truly believe that it takes a village? When did that actually happen?
Yeah. Well before we documented a lot of shit. I think that was more when we were tribal. Like I don't think like once we became agrarian and all that stuff that was what we were. I think we kind of lost that once we became sort of a settled society, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it
I,
does.
and once it became about money, anything with money, once sort of capitalism kind of got its claws into things, everything's individualism, everything is there's this
I think about
whole
a lot, and this is not a topic we'll ever really deep dive on this show, and thank God for that because it's a very upsetting one for me. But Jeffrey Dahmer, there's a lot of discussion about like if he had someone to actually fucking talk to about the urges he was having without judgment, there is a possibility that he could have found a positive outlet. But because necrophilia is so fucking stigmatized, it just festered inside of him. And when there were weird things going on in his life, like he had a literal sexual relationship with a mannequin, when weird things were going on in his life, the reaction from his family was, we had to fucking hide that and make it go away. And never talk about it again. And so a lot of it, I think, is stigmatizing. Kid doesn't want to go to school and say, my dad's drunk and my mom's never home because she's working 2 jobs to pay the bills. Kids do not want to say that. And that's where I'm thinking, you have to be a safe adult, but also we need to start removing stigmas so that children trust the adults in their lives.
Yeah, and that is,
what's going on.
but I feel like that's something that we're moving towards. Like, I'm 53. My parents they weren't the type that were like, don't tell anybody anything. They weren't that type, but still was kind of understood. You just kind of keep everything in house.
Right. What happens at home stays at home.
Yeah. And I remember very clearly my grandmother having some medical issues. She's like, don't call the ambulance because the neighbors. And my dad was like, fuck the neighbors. You need some medical help. Like that is a microcosm of just like, you don't want anybody to know what's going on. But like, it's just something where I believe that like, I think the younger generation, I'm talking about my kids who are just like, we're just going to be open. We're going to work through shit and we're just going to be cool with it. And yeah,
I will say though, I occasionally engage, read some of the younger generations social media stuff, and there's still a lot of, every generation does this. I'm not saying that they specifically have this problem. We all do. Where it's like there are certain ideas that get so ingrained that there's no room to discuss nuance. There's no room to discuss, okay, well, I think I agree that that's right, but that's not how I feel. How do I fix that? And I think that comes a lot from self-protection.
Sure.
Do I really want it to be my job to engage with a 17-year-old misogynist to teach him how not to be misogynist? Fuck no, I don't. So, there's layers to this shit. But I think, like I say, he was evil from a very young age, and people knew it. That's how it made it into the stuff that I read about it. People knew. Yep. And I think maybe we need to start being more comfortable with acting when we know something is wrong, instead of debating how that might play out if we're wrong.
That's fair. So
it's hard. All right. It's easy. What's your takeaway 3 months into Jonestown?
I feel like there's a lot more I need to learn. I think I need to get the book that you were talking about and Jeff Guinn, Guinn,
Guinn.
All right. So I think I need to do that to get a fuller sense.
Yeah. Well, he's an amazing nonfiction author, and you could not ever you're not going to make a mistake. If you want to know about any subject he has written about and you read one of his books, you're going to be fine. So.
Okay. So I feel like I have a bit more grasp of all that went on and the atrocities there. You were talking about listening to the tapes. Actually, the tapes, as much as they were disturbing, there's one image where it's like the bodies are laying out, and then and they're all face down. And the one was like, and then it's like this series of adults, and then there's this little kid.
Yeah.
Sandwiched between two adults, and they all have their armor. And that is just that was the hardest thing for me out of all of that.
So that I was actually talking about the audio tapes, but yeah, that also was very difficult to look at. Yeah.
But again, I will say this very, very, I know that I am a compartmentalizer. I'm a person who go like, that hurts and I don't like that. So here's a box. I'm going to take that and I'm put it in a fucking box and I'm going to shove it in my brain. And it's going to be way over there.
Don't do that, Doug. That's how you get heart attacks.
I've already had one. So clearly I know that doesn't work. But there are times when like things like that, I will sort of figure out how I can manage it. Now, I will say from a emotional perspective, I'm much better off because I don't hold that shit in anymore. But like that sort of thing was just like, ooh, like I know seeing something like that, like my wife would have been like, that is heartbreaking. And then hearing the audio tape on top of it would have not gone well for her. And I don't want to expose her to that. So
I think one of the things I really liked about this documentary is each person they showed on camera, they stopped and told you what members of their family died.
Yep.
And I like when that was happening, I was very overwhelmed emotionally, and nobody likes crying alone in their living room to something they're watching on YouTube, but it, whatever. And I was kind of like, that's interesting because like obviously 900 people died. But then I thought about it and I was like, we don't experience massive loss the way we experience personal loss. And the way that we experience personal loss is often much more emotional and much more easy for us to wrap our brains around. And so I thought that was really fantastic, actually, that they did that because it put it into perspective.
Yeah.
Looking at those images of the bodies is upsetting, but it just is surreal also.
Yeah, there's a part of it where you look at them like, okay, but I don't know. Hey, good night, Jeffrey. Sorry. It is one of those things where I look at that and it's so overwhelming. Like, how do you wrap your brain around it a bit? And if it's something that's too big for my brain to wrap around, I will tend to, I tend to kind of just like, okay, well, I'm just going to kind of push it over here. It's not that I can't deal with it or I'm not doing that. Like I'm trying not to do the things like that I did when I was younger that make it harder for me to mentally handle things. But like with this,
Yeah.
with seeing the images, is just like as a dad, seeing these people like with arms around a dead corpse of a kid, and I'm just like,
And that's why I really think it's important for people to understand that this was strategically done. They killed the children first. That was on purpose.
mm-hmm.
That was part of
Yeah.
a strategy. And I know I've harped on this before, so I don't want to go too much into it, but someone on the documentary did say that they lost every member of their family. He was talking about his wife. His wife was like, fuck it, killed herself.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't do that at gunpoint. She didn't do that by being injected. She just was like, guess this is what I'm doing. And again, I don't like calling that suicide really because it's coerced in ways that are impossible to imagine. You are standing in the middle of hundreds of children dying violent deaths. Yeah, that's pretty hard to fucking cope with. And other people are being held at gunpoint and being injected and, you know, all these other things. So, but I do think it's important to realize, like, you can't imagine, like, a parent who has not lost a child cannot fucking imagine losing a child.
Nope.
Now imagine thinking this is another drill, this is another loyalty test, and you just fucking killed your own child.
You willingly participated in it, thinking that it was just not a thing. So yeah, that's all kinds of fucked up.
The human brain doesn't go, oh, Jim Jones killed my child, so I'm fine. That's not how it works.
Yeah. All right. Well, this was, I think we should wrap up on this bit. So this was the last of our Jonestown things. Jonestown's a complicated, deep cult that is kind of difficult to just wrap your head around, even in 3 episodes or 3 volumes, as we dub them.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Renee, why don't we review what you had to drink? Because other people might have.
Yeah. I had jungle juice. Well, I'm not on, and there's nothing on the screen unless I'm wrong. Am I wrong?
No, now it's here.
Oh, me. Okay. I had jungle juice. I almost finished it because I needed to for this episode. And again, basic recipe: Hawaiian Punch, 7-Up vodka, or Everclear if you hate yourself.
No. Are you trying to die?
Yeah, I'm not tonight. So I had Hawaiian Punch, 7-Up, Tito's vodka, pineapple juice, and just a little splash of lemon juice.
Nice. So yeah, that is very much. I hear jungle juice and I think college time. So yeah, that's a challenge for me.
I have actually puked this up once, but it was a really long time ago, and I'm fine now.
I had this, which was called Proper Dose, and I just thought it was a macabre and appropriate name for what you're doing. So this is from Beer Tree Brew, which is just down the road from me. And it's a New England. Well, it's funny, is they classify it as a New England style IPA. They said hazy on there. It's not a New England. It's more New England. It's citrusy and all that stuff. So it was a very good drink. That fucking bottle on it is just ominous now in what we're talking about. So apologies on that.
It's hard. It's a fine line to walk with cult themed cocktails. I gotta say, we boxed ourselves into a corner. We appreciate that you guys are not calling us on our bullshit every single week because we know. Here's the thing. I think there's no way. Like, I used to edit a dark culture magazine, a million years ago in prehistoric times, and we called it "Putting the Cheese on Your Vegetables." Nobody wants to eat their vegetables. You put some cheese on it, people want to eat their vegetables. So I hope that's what we're doing here.
Hopefully so. All right. So next month we are doing, as we mentioned earlier. So this is Bad Faith Christian Nationalism's Unholy War on Democracy. So we are taking on the cult of Christian nationalism, which is, it's vast. It's vast. I'm not sure. I've not seen this documentary yet. It is on a variety of streaming platforms, as you see. But it's one of those things, like, I know when I was watching the trailer mentioned the Seven Mountains Mandate, which is that is the probably the most insidious thing for Christian nationalism that I can think of.
Oh, yeah, but we're gonna get deep in the insidiousness because, like I said, over 20 years ago, I was reading these forums while I was doing my research and not like for fun. And they laid out plans that I saw happen as a, like, 10, 15 years later. I saw it work. So
Yeah. So yeah, get ready to strap yourselves in, folks. This is it's gonna be a bit of a mess, but yeah. So yeah.
in December, we're gonna have to do something fun. We have to
Hey,
save the child sex abuse follow-up to the Rajneeshis for next year and do something fun in December.
I couldn't agree more. We're gonna have to find a silly cult for December just to kind of ring the end of the year out into a new year where we can get dark again. But yeah. Yeah. So anyway, Renee, any other comments you have for tonight?
You know what? I gotta say, you kept talking about how much reading I've done on Jonestown and how much I know. I'm done. This is it. Done.
Yeah, you're good.
I'm never gonna learn another thing about Jonestown.
That Jonestown is a lot deeper than like. Granted, I knew it was fucking really big and kind of vast, and just trying to understand. I'm not. I'm probably going to read the book you recommended, and then I'm probably good too.
But I will also say the audiobook is phenomenal. So if that's easier for you, it's very well done.
I might have to do that. So,
but I'm done. Yeah, I actually have what used to be considered like the definitive book on Jonestown, called The Raven, and I've never read it. And I'm like, I guess I never will. This was too much, man. It was too much.
So anyway, Renee, thank you so much. And just this journey has kind of been super interesting, weird, and fun. And I'm just appreciative that we get to do it together.
Yeah.
So, all right, folks, do take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next month.